Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch another episode for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very high pedestal. This transformative experience has led me to create a podcast that is all things mental health. Would it benefit you to hear from mental health professionals and influencers? Would it also add value to your life to hear real-life, authentic stories from people talking about their mental health, the issues they face, and how they actively combat them? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you came to the right place. I want to start by congratulating you for making your mental health a priority. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. On this episode, I'm happy to introduce my guest, James Lawless. I met James several years ago through a bunch of mutual friends down in Tampa, Florida, when I was a student at UT. This platform has allowed us to reconnect and make an incredible difference together. James is a licensed mental health counselor who has spent over 7 years in the Rhode Island Office of Public Defender, assisting their clients with mental health, substance abuse, and medical issues in order to enable effective and comprehensive representation of these individuals in court. I would like to now introduce James Lawless. James, thanks for coming on my show.
Thank you for having me on, Vin. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoy everything that you're doing. I think it's super important work that you're doing and impactful.
I appreciate that. Would you mind please introducing yourself to our listeners, give them a preview of your journey, and then touch on your role relating to mental health?
Sure, absolutely. So as you stated, my name is James Lawless. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Rhode Island. I'd say that most of my experience in regards to mental health comes from working directly with justice-involved individuals who struggle with severe and persistent mental illness, and most of the time, in addition to that, co-occurring substance use disorder. Through this experience, I learned a lot about the way that society views mental illness and treats our most vulnerable people. And by vulnerable people, I'm speaking about those in poverty, those who are chronically homeless, those who suffer from untreated mental health issues and lack support. What I learned is that once this vulnerable population finds their way into the criminal justice system, we as a society don't really do a great job at listening to their experiences and learn and understand what their needs are. Instead, we focus on the crime and quickly seek retribution. And through this approach, we create more barriers and obstacles for these already vulnerable people. And without the skills and the supports in place to assist them, they find themselves more at risk than they were before they entered into the system. So this opens them up to experience a relapse or reoffend, which creates recidivism. And recidivism is one of the main reasons why the country has a mass incarceration problem. So in working with these individuals directly, I learned how far having empathy and providing support and becoming an advocate for them can go, as it gives them hope and increases their self-worth, knowing that, there are people that care about them. My job is to give them a voice so that the court system can make better decisions and put these individuals in a position where they can make progress rather than have additional barriers created for them. And in addition to my work with the criminal justice system, I began working in private practice after I passed my licensure exam. And this was a couple years ago. So in that capacity, I strictly work with people who aren't justice involved. So I've gotten kind of both ends of the spectrum. So 3 months ago, I actually started my own private practice doing psychotherapy and counseling, which has been a little bit different for me, but I find it to be, just as fulfilling.
Yeah, well, man, thanks for all the great work you're doing. I'm looking forward to adding this perspective to the show. I try to diversify everybody's opinions and perspectives I can bring in, and it's great to get a look from that, inside the incarcerated, see how mental health is related to them. So thanks for sharing. On each episode, something I do is I share a mental health story of someone who's famous because I want to let you, the listeners, know that you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone looks like they are healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. Today, I will introduce the mental health story of someone who played a role in both of our lives growing up, in Jim Carrey. And I think this article is a perfect example of how you can't judge a book by its cover, because everybody remembers the joys that movies like Ace Ventura brings them, just pure happiness. And Like I said, we both grew up watching these movies, and I never really saw him outside that funny role. And now he's opened up about speaking about the difficulties associated with maintaining that healthy mindset, and that he actually struggled with depression, which I think is exactly why I add this segment to the show, because someone who's always so positive can actually be very sad inside. And in a 60 Minutes interview, he told us all that he was on Prozac for a long time. It may have helped me out for a jam for a little bit, but people stay on it forever. I had to get off it at a certain point because I realized that, everything's just okay. And James, what'd you take away from Jim coming out and talking about these issues?
Yeah, I think someone who, we grew up watching on TV, who, like you said, made us laugh over and over again, to hear his story and to make us understand that even though you might look happy all the time, there still can be some underlying issues going on where you experience, sadness or bits of depression. For him, I could see how he might be burning the candle at both ends as an actor, and,
Right.
having nights where you're barely sleeping and doing a lot all at once. And then for that all to catch up to you at some point, I feel like is very common. And I could see how at first he might have been prescribed, Prozac. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't
Yeah.
really speak to that as a prescription, but I do know that antidepressants are used at the early stages of therapy sometimes, because it gives you that person that kick that they need to have some hope, right? Where they can have more effective, make more progress in therapy, right? And then down the line, as they begin, to see themselves doing better, they might feel that they can work towards getting off of the antidepressant or the medication that they are on, with this new mindset that they've been able to develop. And it sounds like that's what Jim was speaking about, was that at first he needed it, but then realized he didn't need it after he was able to gain um, some coping skills and some good experiences through therapy.
Absolutely. It's come up on a few episodes, even in my personal life, right after my accident, where people get these drugs and it kind of just muffs the pain and it masks it, and it's just kind of delaying the inevitable. Would you agree with that?
I think, yeah, in terms of people, self-medicating, to deal with symptoms, um, for sure. I think it's a way that they can avoid actually dealing with the underlying problems, and it makes them,
Yeah.
it provides them with some short-term relief. Um, but for a medication, like Prozac, I like to think that, he may have tried therapy at first and it might not have been going anywhere because he just had an overall sense or feeling of hopelessness, helplessness, severe depression, where it was necessary to get him on something to kind of get him out of that.
That's a good
And
point
it
of that.
sounds
Yeah.
like it was used effectively for sure. Prozac isn't a drug that has any, psychedelic experience or psychoactive. It just increases the, so dopamine levels, the serotonin levels in your brain to, get you feeling a little bit better than you had before on a day-to-day basis.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing that. And now it's time for the main event. My goal is to feature many valuable guests in this podcast: doctors, influencers, people talking about their mental health. So, me and my guests will go over these series of 6 questions, which only slightly varies depending on if my guest is licensed. So, today we have that. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Many would agree that the more common or talked about types of mental illnesses are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, or schizophrenia disorders. What areas do you come across the most?
So my answer to this question would be twofold because I work in two different areas, of
Yeah,
mental health.
please. That's great.
So within the criminal justice system, the main issues I come across are the mood disorders, which would include, major depression, bipolar disorder, the psychotic disorders, which would be the schizophrenia or the schizoaffective disorders. Those are just two of the more common under those, umbrellas. And then personality disorders as well: borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. I see a lot of those. But the most common would be substance use disorder, in regards to, people becoming involved with the criminal justice system, or a combination of both of them. Um, the severe mental illness, coupled with the substance use disorder as well. In my private practice, I'd say that most of my clients present with problems related to chronic stress, or they have adjustment disorders, which occur when anxiety and depressive symptoms develop in response to a recent stressor. And then I also see a lot of anxiety disorders and depressive disorders. So as you can see within the criminal justice system, most
Yeah,
of it is severe and persistent mental illness. In my private practice, it's not really the SPMI population, but more of the more functional individuals.
absolutely. Well, I think probably it gives you the ability to give more perspective, being so well-rounded that you are.
Absolutely, definitely.
Where do you see yourself going down? Which path, if you had to choose, which area would you like to go down more?
Yeah, I mean, that's the internal battle I constantly go through. I don't know. I mean, the work I do within the criminal justice system, I feel like really, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. I feel like I
Yeah,
make the biggest difference here. I feel like I can really relate to some of the people, not through experience, but just I have the ability to, actively listen and be empathetic to them in a society that doesn't really have many people like that and willing to advocate for them even after they've been charged with, criminal charges or some even heinous crimes. So, um, but I do feel like I have little victories along the way in helping some of these clients,
for
and it's
sure.
super fulfilling.
Yeah.
To me, I just keep it kind of produces a high for me to help these people who
No, it's
have
a
had
good
trouble
thing.
helping themselves. But
It's a
then in the
good thing
private
you're
practice,
doing.
it's I'm trying to like find myself in private practice, so still trying to grow there. So I don't know if I can really answer that right now because I feel great where I'm at in my capacity within the criminal justice system, but the private
Yeah.
practice stuff has been really fun and fulfilling too. So
You're doing a great service, man, and it's something that needs to be done. You're right about everything you're saying. There's not really a big enough voice or platform there, and you're definitely doing your part. But when did you first decide that a career relating to mental health was going to be the right one for you? What was that moment? Paint that picture for us.
yeah, so it probably clicked for me in college. I always knew I wanted to help people. I felt like when I was growing up, I would always I feel like people would come and talk to me, and I always wondered like, why does everyone always come talk to me with their problems? And so I felt like I needed to be in a helping field. So I began studying towards a degree in criminal justice in college, and I felt like I was kind of being forced to either go to law school or go into law enforcement. It was like one or the other. And I realized probably in my junior year, I really didn't want to do either. I didn't see myself as being someone who carried a gun every day, and to be honest, I wasn't interested in committing to law school, which in hindsight, I think maybe that would have been a good route for me, but
Hmm.
no regrets.
Right.
Instead, I wanted to help people who were at risk of entering into the criminal justice system to address some of the needs and factors that led them to getting involved with the system um, initially. So, and I feel like the criminal justice system has a really long way to go. And I think that we're making small steps towards moving away from the broken system that we currently have by utilizing the mental health and substance abuse professionals at all stages of the legal process to help them to help decision makers make more informed decisions in an effort to rehabilitate rather than incarcerate. But as I said, I still think we have a really long way to go there. But I hope that people studying towards a degree in criminal justice doesn't just mean you're either going to go to law school or you're going to become a cop. Um, I feel like there needs to be another avenue there, and that's the avenue that I took.
Yeah. Do you see yourself you're gonna keep evolving with both angles right now? I think that's a great thing. I'm very interested to see where you take that. If you think you'll take maybe like a hybrid type role down the road.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I feel like I do that right now.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I'm
feel
looking
like I
forward.
wear so many hats right now. So
Yeah, it's kind of very entrepreneurial with the two things going on, having your own
sure.
practice, and I'm sure certain things can carry over. What are one or two things that you really took away from your job with the public defender that you've transitioned over to your private practice?
I found that it's super important to really learn someone's story,
Mhm.
rather than just have them come in and try to learn what their symptoms are and treat them. Um, I think that you really need to learn someone's story before making those type of decisions. And when I say learn their story, I mean I want to know everything about your life and your experiences that you've gone through. I think by understanding them, um, you're able to provide them with better clinical support and treatment. Um, I think the mental health system is so quick to treat rather than listen. Um,
Absolutely.
and So with the public defender's office, a lot of what I do is I have to listen to my clients so I have a better understanding of why they are where they are, how they ended up there. A
Right.
lot of times I have to write reports on them to submit to the court so that they can learn about who the person is and what they've been through in their life. So in my private practice, I really spend a lot of time trying to learn about their life experiences before making any important clinical decisions.
Absolutely. So you're probably seeing mental health difficulties at all ends of the scale. What advice can you give to our listeners as what may be considered a potential early sign that they may be developing some form of mental illness?
Yeah, so in terms of warning signs, I'd say there's three things. I think the first thing that people need to pay attention to is their family history, because research shows that, someone's biological predisposition to mental illness is a telltale sign of vulnerability. And
Okay.
that vulnerability is dictated by your environment, age, physical health, and stress. Um, and I'd say that most severe mental health issues don't manifest until between the ages of 18 and 26. So for people when they're within that age range, to understand that they are vulnerable towards whatever they're biologically predisposed to, and it comes out through stress, right? So
Right, right.
that's the other thing, paying attention to stress. These underlying mental health issues are more likely to emerge in times of extreme stress. So if you know that you have a family history of mental illness, you definitely want to be better prepared to handle and manage stress. You don't really want to jump from one extreme to a completely different extreme erratically. You want to be prepared for these changes, because if you're not and stress gets overwhelming, you're making yourself more vulnerable to developing mental illness. And then the third thing, I'd say, is substance use. If you have a family history of mental illness and use substances, you are at far more risk of developing mental illness. And that includes marijuana, which I see as a big problem as society starts to really accept marijuana as
That's a
for
good point.
medicinal purposes. I think the youth are thinking, yeah, this is fine. Like, we can just use smoke weed recreationally, but they're ignoring what that they may be biologically predisposed to mental illness, and this marijuana is exacerbating those symptoms. So to synthesize all of that and to summarize it, if you're aware that a family member struggles with mental illness, speak with them about their experience and how it started. Do your part to educate yourself or seek education on their conditions. Pay attention to your environment and make sure that you have the skills necessary to manage stress, and try to avoid substances in an effort to self-medicate the symptoms that you're experiencing. Instead, if you are anxious, if you're depressed, if you're unsure of what's going on and it's creating a lot of worry in your life and fear, reach out to a mental health professional. Don't be so quick to reach out to, you know, don't be so quick to pack a bowl or smoke a joint with a buddy to make you feel better, because that might lead you down a much worse path. Speak to a mental health professional and they can help you understand what you're going through a little bit better.
You know what? It's very interesting, your take, and I'm intrigued by your answer here, where, the society accepting medical marijuana, all of these things you're saying, it could really have an adverse effect in the mental health world. What are some potential problems that you think could happen with that?
I see it all the time in my capacity at the public defender's office. I see young adult males who smoke a lot of marijuana, who enter into the system and are experiencing psychotic symptoms. They get arrested because they're psychotic
Okay.
or manic or experiencing delusions, very paranoid, and they're engaging in behaviors as a result of these symptoms. But it starts with them smoking marijuana. So they'll be smoking marijuana that day and it'll bring out these symptoms. Next thing you know, they do something they get arrested for, and now they're facing criminal charges. And I see it's a trend that constantly happens within the criminal justice system. And it's not just marijuana that exacerbates, psychotic symptoms. Um, but I find it to be a very common thing. And what's interesting is a lot of people will say, "Oh, I just was smoking marijuana. Like, I wasn't doing any other drugs." So they just like society, they kind of accept that as that can't be why I feel this way, because it's accepted by society. Yet by doing that, it's exacerbating symptoms and putting them at risk to engage in behaviors that they get arrested for and then end up in the criminal justice system. So that trend I see happening, and it all comes down to education. I think
Yeah.
we as a society need to educate the youth that although marijuana is, proven to be effective medicinally for certain conditions, I don't know that at between that age, recreational use is really of benefit unless prescribed by a medical professional.
Hey, that's great perspective. Thanks for sharing that, because this is going to be a topic that is going to be talked about a lot in the coming months. because these are huge issues. But if you could pick three here, Jim, and only three, because I want the three most important things. What are three things our listeners can start to do on a daily or short-term basis to improve their overall mental health?
Self-care, self-care, self-care. Those are
Love
the
it.
three.
Yeah.
And proper self-care will absolutely make you less vulnerable. I keep saying vulnerable. And another term I like to use for self-care is vulnerability prevention. Self-care equals vulnerability prevention. And what happens is another societal thing is social media portrays self-care as an indulgence, right? So like, let's, watch Netflix and eat a tub of ice cream, hashtag self-care. Let me take a bath
Yeah,
and
let's talk
put
about what
candles.
self-care you mean for sure, because there's definitely some.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's confusing. And honestly, after you watch 10 episodes of the same show and eat a tub of ice cream, you're not going to feel good afterwards. You know what I mean? It's going to feel good in the moment, but you're not going to feel good afterwards. And yes, relaxation is part of self-care for sure, but it's definitely more complex. And I like to see self-care as a discipline, not an indulgence. And it's multidimensional. There's multiple domains that go into self-care: social, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And if you can make improvements to your self-care in each of those 5 domains, you're putting yourself in a much less vulnerable position, right? So what are 3 short-term things you can do to improve your self-care, right? Number 1, sleep hygiene. We need to restore our body's natural ability to fight off stress. And we do this by getting deep sleep, right? There's so much technology in our life, and it seems like we jump from our phones to TV and then try to go right to bed. We need to
100%.
eliminate technology from the bedroom, eliminate technology from the sleep routine. Your bedroom should be only for sleep, and that's it. And that sleep routine you have should begin an hour before bed. And during that hour, no phones, no blue light,
I
no
like that.
stressful activity, no TV, no drinking alcohol. These will all get in the way of allowing your body to get into that deep sleep that it needs to restore our body's natural ability to fight off stress the next day. So what can you do during that 1 hour before bed? Read a book, meditate, mindfulness techniques. You can Google it. You can on YouTube. There's so much you can do. You got to let your body wind down before attempting to go to sleep, and then you'll fall into that deep sleep that your body desperately needs. And then the next day, your body can handle a lot of stress that comes your way. But without that deep sleep, it's going to rely on your mind to try to handle it. And if our thought processes aren't healthy, we're going to have a difficult time doing that. It's going to create a lot of worry. There's 2 more.
Yeah,
Just
keep
2
them
more
coming, man.
tips.
These are great. Keep them coming.
So social engagement, which is, social distancing is a really hot topic right now, right? But that doesn't mean social disengagement. So when it comes down to self-care, it's very important that we're getting social engagement, because as human beings, we're social people, right? So when it comes to self-care, I define social engagement as valuable interactions with other people. You need to make sure that, not on a day-to-day basis if you don't have time, but at least, 5 times a week, you're getting valuable interaction with other people. Very important. And then the other thing, a lot of us throughout the day, we just have worries, right? Worries enter our head randomly throughout the day. We have no control over it. They just come in out of nowhere, and they create more overwhelming and chronic stress. Set up a worry time. Schedule a time at night in the early evening. You don't want to do it when it's during your sleep routine. In the early evening, set up a worry time where you deal with all the worries that came up during the day, right? So all your daily worries get thrown into this worry time so that you don't have to deal with them as they come into our minds, right? So something enters into your head, you start worrying about it, you say, I'll deal with you later, and you throw it into the worry time. You'll find that most of your worries, once you get to worry time, will dissipate and will work themselves out without really stressing over them. But you'll still have some time, 20 to 30 minutes where you can deal with and problem solve some of the worries that came your way. But it'll help you it'll increase your focus during the day and will minimize your anxiety by taking those worries and tossing them into a time where you can deal with them later on. Those are 3 suggestions, 3 short-term things that I think people can do to improve their overall mental health on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love them. I like doing the short term before the long term, because people are very impatient when they want results for anything. And I think those are all very, very feasible things. But let's shift that right into the long-term commitments. What are 2 longer term commitments our listeners can start to make to create a healthier mindset?
For sure. I think number one, therapy in some shape or form, in person, text, telehealth. There's all different platforms that you can receive that you can engage in therapy through. And just having someone who listens to you actively and empathetically without any judgment in a space where you're free to experience and feel all of your emotions is super valuable. And just knowing that that place exists for you is important. And I think that's something that you can commit to long term that could improve your headspace. And then the other thing, which I do this a lot with my patients who struggle with low self esteem, explore and identify what your main values are in life. And we identify the top three values in life. And you want to make sure that your goals are in line with your values. And you
100%.
want to check in on everything that you are doing and ask yourself, is this in line with my values? We have limited energy on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes it might not feel like it, but we do. And we need to make sure that we're using that energy wisely and that it's in line with what we value, because ultimately that's what makes us happy, right? So for example, if your number one value in life is family, but you spend most of your energy working, it's likely that you're not going to feel good. And then someone will say, well, I need to provide for my family. So if I don't work, my family's going to suffer, right?
Right.
And right there, we've identified a goal and can make a plan to figure out how to create a better work-life balance so that more energy is spent with family. So it's very important that we are constantly reassessing what our values are in life and making sure that what we are doing on a daily basis is in line with those values. If it's not, it's probably not worth it or not worth your energy. So that's another long-term thing that you can do to help create a more positive mental headspace.
Yeah. How often do you think people should realign those goals and those thoughts? I think what you're saying is spot on there. I know things go stale. How often would you recommend people just to, realign, step back, get back on everything?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good question. I mean, I think you can do that whenever. I mean, I don't think that there's a specific time. You should always reassess your values, but um, for example, if you just get married, you might want to realign your values. If you have a child, you might want to realign your values and your goals, because now you're bringing someone else, you're bringing another responsibility into this world that is
Absolutely.
gonna benefit or this is going to negatively affect them. So you want to try to bring them in with your values in what your goals are. But I mean, I think we should constantly be reassessing this to make sure that, and then we can be confident with, all right, these three things are my most valuable priorities in life, and this is what makes me happy, and I need to make sure that everything I do is in line with them. And that's going to put you in a better position um, to feel good, to feel better, and to feel happier with yourself.
I'm on board with you, man. I reassess all the time. Each month, I make sure when I write down what are my three biggest goals and objectives for this month to make sure all my actions, the way I live, is surrounded by accomplishing those goals, because that's going to make me happy. But what are
Yeah.
some ways you plan on raising awareness for the importance of mental health in the future? What are we working on?
Yeah, I think right now, I think I'm just trying to educate people within the criminal justice system. And that
Love it.
includes defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges, criminal justice stakeholders, interns that I have, students. I want to educate them on mental illness and how we can improve the way that the system treats people with mental illness. I mean, research has proven that incarceration puts people with severe mental illness at further risk to relapse and reoffend. So why do we continue to use incarceration as a deterrent to behavior? It doesn't work.
I
So
love it.
we need to take a step back, right? And that's where I want to put and promote awareness in. We need the federal and state governments to provide funding to the community mental health system, into, getting people who can are in a better position to address behavior, and so that we can improve community support and improve community treatment for those struggling with mental illness, instead of providing additional funding to the correctional system so that they can figure out a way to treat people with mental illness. Incarceration doesn't work for people with mental illness. So we need to figure out a better way, something better to come up with, that includes people with a mental health background, people who are educated in mental health, clinicians, substance abuse professionals, public health people, doctors. They need to be involved. They need to be at the table. We got to fix this system that we've created, because right now it doesn't work.
Hey, well, I think you're in a very good position to be at the forefront of this fight. You have the passion and the intensity behind the issue. So I'm very interested to see where you can take this for sure. So thanks so much, James, for coming on today. I know our listeners see all the value in your episode today. I really enjoyed how you gave perspective from two sides of the puzzle to give multiple viewpoints on mental health and how you can attack it. I very much like your short-term commitments because I think they're very feasible and everybody listening on can start to utilize those right away. But it's time for the last word. And I do this on my other podcast, What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur too, because I want our listeners to really get to know my guests. Is there something you'd like to share with everybody listening on that we didn't get to touch on today?
There's people out there that care about you. There's people out there that want to hear from you, that want to hear about what you're going through and want to help and provide support in whichever way possible. So, if this podcast is able to get you up, get you to call, someone to talk to, that's what I'm hoping people can get from this, because, we want to see everyone happy with themselves. We want to see people do better. And there's people out there who want to listen.
Awesome, James. Can you please go ahead and share your social media, your website, or ways for our listeners to follow your endeavors, or for those in the Rhode Island area, request your services?
Absolutely. I'm on Facebook. You can type in Lawless Counseling. I'm on Instagram at Lawless Counseling, and on psychologytoday.com. That's probably the best platform to reach me through. And if you search James Lawless there, I'll come up on Psychology Today. And my email is james@lawlesscounseling.com.
Great. Everybody listening on, be sure to reach out to him, especially if you're in the Rhode Island area. He does great work. Be sure to check out the show on Instagram and Facebook at A Mental Health Break and on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. I'm at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube, and my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, on Amazon now. DM me or email me, though. I want to hear what you think. If you liked today's episode, please continue listening and rate A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering guests for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all on the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci.